I never expected my Monday morning alarm to feel like a warning. But there was 5:45 a.m., the pale digits on my phone glowing through bleary eyes. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, half listening to the quiet hum of the city waking up outside my window. I'm Alex Morgan, 28, marketing associate at Radcliffe and Lane Advertising in New York City. It's a competitive office, polished floors, glass-walled conference rooms, and a boss who doesn't tolerate excuses. My boss, Ethan Harper, is 40, razor-sharp in a suit that fits like armor. He's the kind of man who commands respect the instant he steps into a room. Tall, dark hair slicked back, quiet confidence in every measured movement. I've worked under Ethan for 2 years. I admire him, his vision, his discipline, the way he pushes our team to projects we'd never believed possible. But over time, admiration took a softer shape. I caught myself watching the line of his jaw, the way his sleeve caught the light when he pointed at a screen. I chided myself, keep it professional. I liked him enough to know that blurting out feelings would be a disaster, ethically, socially, and career-wise. So I kept quiet. That morning, I showered, dressed in my routine of button-down shirt and chinos, drove across the Williamsburg Bridge, and parked in the lot behind our building. The city felt cold, autumn's first frost turning the streets slippery. I grabbed my coffee from the corner bodega, black, extra shot, no sugar. My lifeline. When I stepped into the lobby, I saw Ethan already at the front desk. Unusual. He normally arrives at 8 a.m. sharp. His face was half in shadow under the lobby's overhead lights. Pale, drawn, and intense. Our eyes met for a second. He nodded, distracted. I swallowed. "Morning, sir." "Alex," he said, voice low. "Get up to my office in 10. He didn't look at me again. My heart thumped. I'd never been summoned so early, so cryptically. In 10 minutes, I was at his door. I paused, smoothed my tie, and knocked once. "Come in." The office was as austere as ever. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a sleek black desk, 2 chairs neatly aligned. Ethan sat behind his desk, no files in front of him, hands clasped. I closed the door and stood at attention, like an audition. "Sit," he said, patting the chair opposite him. I sat, coffee in hand. He watched me. Finally, he leaned back. "I need to check something," he said. "Show me the Matthews campaign deck." I blinked. "Of course." "It's in the shared folder." I tapped the folder on my laptop and projected the slides onto his wall-mounted screen. He scanned each slide intently. I stayed quiet, heart racing. He closed the deck without comment. "Tell me about the target demographic again." I launched into the facts. Ages 25 to 40, urban professionals, preference for eco-friendly brands. He nodded. Then he looked at me. Really looked. "Are you okay?" Surprised, I paused. "Yes, sir. Everything's fine." He frowned. "You look tired." "Long weekend." I muttered. He studied me. Then he said, "You didn't take the Friday light planning session, and you left early on Thursday. I need you at full strength on this one." "I'm on it," I said. He tapped his pen. "Good. One more thing. Keep this between us, but I need fresh eyes on a personal project. Something I'm working on outside the office. I want your opinion." My pulse skipped. "A personal project?" "Sure," I said, trying to sound normal. He slid a notebook across the desk. It was unmarked, leather-bound, thick. He opened it to a hand-drawn logo idea, sharp angles, a stylized H. Underneath, mock UPS of a website homepage, black background, white text, elegant serif font, not the usual corporate look. This was different. "Habersham and Company," he said. "My new venture. Private consulting. I'm testing the branding. What do you think?" I studied the pages. The designs were striking, dark, dramatic, refined, perfect for a high-end consultancy. I stammered. "It's impressive. The iconography is bold. The tone feels authoritative." He nodded slowly. "Exactly what I want. But I can't have anyone at the firm know. Radcliffe and Lane is our lifeblood." "Understood," I said, feeling honored and uneasy. My coffee trembled in my hand. He closed the notebook. I need you on this. And the Matthews campaign, obviously. He paused. But if you ever need help, anything, come to me. Understood. I nodded, too aware of how personal this felt. Yes, sir. Thank you. He dismissed me with a slight nod. Carry on, Alex. As I walked back to my desk, my mind reeled. On one hand, a compliment, exclusive access to his private venture. On the other, a line drawn deeper between professional and personal. And he told me to come to him if I ever need help. That felt unusual, generous, yet a little paternal, protective. My chest tightened. All morning, I juggled 2 projects. Matthew slides by midday, Habersham branding notes by tomorrow. My co-workers shot curious glances. Ethan's eyes inside my email draft. But when I met his gaze, he offered a brief, almost imperceptible nod. Focus. I trust you, it said. At lunch, I sat at my desk. I ate a protein bar, thumbed through Ethan's notebook under the table. The sketches were sharp, well thought, built on his long-standing reputation in finance consulting. It made sense. But who was Habersham and Company? Who would hire his secret firm? My mind drifted to the statement. If you ever need help. Help? Me? From him? The idea was both reassuring and unsettling. That evening, I stayed late. The office cleared except for the cleaning crew in neon vests. I finished my draft of the Matthews deck and sent it to Ethan. Then I opened the Habersham mock UPS. I made notes. Consider warmth and accent tone for hospitality clients. Explore simplified icon for mobile legibility. I heard footsteps. It was him, Ethan, stepping into my cubicle area. He looked tired, sleeves rolled up. You're still here, he said quietly. I wanted to refine the notes before tomorrow. I replied. He nodded, then added, Good. I like your perspective. He stood a moment longer, as if weighing whether to say more. Then he said, Let's grab a coffee tomorrow morning. My treat. We'll talk through Habersham details before the office crowd. My heart sank and soared at once. Yes, sir. He hesitated, then softened his voice. Call me Ethan when it's after hours. My stomach fluttered. Okay. He smiled, briefly, almost shyly, then turned on his heel and disappeared. I watched him go, pulse pounding. Ethan Harper, my boss, the epitome of professional distance, had just invited me into his world, into a secret venture. He wanted my honest opinion after hours and asked me by name without his sir barrier. I closed my laptop, stood, and stretched under the fluorescent light. The building's corridors looked different, longer, darker, filled with possibility and risk. I grabbed my bag, headed for the elevator, and felt a mixture of excitement and dread. That night, my phone buzzed, a text from Ethan's personal number. Thanks for staying late. See you tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. at the Grey Cup across the street. Usual spot. My pulse leapt. Usual spot? We'd never met outside work. But something inside him called it usual for our early meeting now. I typed, sounds good, looking forward to it. I stared at the screen, then locked my phone and slipped it into my pocket. Tomorrow, first coffee with Ethan, boss by day, confidant by dawn. The lines between work and something more were already blurring, and I wasn't sure if I should be thrilled or terrified, because when you begin to see someone beyond their title, everything else starts to matter. I was 10 minutes early to the Grey Cup the next morning, not because I was anxious. Because I was anxious. The cafe was small, upscale, quiet. Gray and white tiles lined the floor. Edison bulbs hung overhead. The kind of place where regulars didn't need menus. I'd passed a dozen times, but I'd never stepped inside until now. Ethan had called it our usual spot in his text, as if we were two colleagues with an unspoken tradition. But we weren't. Not yet. I picked a corner table by the window. Ordered 2 black coffees. Mine extra shot. His same. I'd watched him order enough times in the office kitchen to know. I was halfway through nervously aligning the sugar packets when the bell above the door chimed. There he was, Ethan Harper. Boss. Mystery. Man I should never fall for. He wore a dark overcoat, collar turned up, and black leather gloves. A businessman out of some winter novel. But when he spotted me, he smiled. Briefly, genuinely. And suddenly he was just a man. Human. Real. Early, he said, pulling off his gloves. Habit, I said, standing halfway. Yours or mine? He smirked. Yours now. We sat. His eyes found the coffee. You remembered? I shrugged. Same order every day. Kind of hard to miss. He stirred the cup slowly. You notice things. I work in marketing. His eyes met mine. That's not what I meant. I looked down. This wasn't a meeting. This was something else. He didn't pull out a laptop. Didn't hand me a folder. Instead, he leaned back and sipped his coffee like we'd been doing this for years. I'm building something, he said quietly, outside the firm. Something I haven't told anyone else, not even my family. I nodded, waiting. I've spent over a decade in corporate, built campaigns, managed clients, led teams. But I've also lost parts of myself doing it. Radcliffe and Lane is efficient, but sterile. What I want, with Habersham, is to create something with soul. Clients who don't just want results, who want truth. I blinked. So it's more than branding? It's consulting with integrity, he said. Helping people communicate without the lies, the gloss, the fake smile. I tilted my head. That's rare. It is, he said. That's why I need people I trust, who understand nuance, who don't need everything spelled out. He paused, watching me. I want you to be part of it. My mouth went dry. Part of it how? Help shape the voice. The message, not just behind a screen. In front of it. Strategy. Client relations. Eventually, partnership. I stared at him. Was he offering me a future? Or something else? You barely know me outside work, I said quietly. I know what matters, he replied. I know you listen when others speak. I know you care about language. I know you don't hide behind performance. That's rare, Alex. My name and his voice still did something to me. Unfair? How much? He leaned in. I also know you haven't told anyone about this meeting. Or the notebook. No, I admitted, I haven't. He nodded. Good. Because trust is everything. There was something in his tone that wasn't just professional. Something slower, warmer, a beat too long in the way he watched my face. My stomach flipped. I need someone honest, he added. Not just loyal, honest. And I understood. That was the word I'd been missing all along. After the meeting, we walked out together. The cold air hit like a slap, but neither of us said anything. He turned toward the office building. I turned with him, but just before we reached the crosswalk, he stopped. Let's not walk in together. It wasn't cruel, just careful. Got it, I said, heart sinking. Not because I'm hiding, he added quickly, but because I'm protecting something. Let me build this slowly, the right way. I nodded. I understand. He gave the faintest smile, then turned, walked ahead alone, and vanished into the building. Back at my desk, I couldn't focus. Every slide I made, every bullet point I wrote, felt like static. What was I doing? This wasn't just about marketing. Not anymore. It was about him. And maybe, terrifyingly, about me too. Later that afternoon, I got a Slack ping. Ethan Harper, you. Great insight this morning. More to come. Thanks for keeping this between us. I stared at the screen. Typed, deleted, typed again. Of course. Always. Over the next week, things shifted. He didn't speak to me differently in meetings. Still the same clipped tone, the same firm expectations. But I could feel it, in the way his eyes lingered a second longer during briefings, the way he asked my opinion before others, the way he waited until everyone else left before offering a quick, quiet, good work today, the kind of praise that didn't need volume to mean everything. Then came Friday. After hours, I was the last one in the office, tweaking a presentation, when I heard the elevator ding. Footsteps. Slow. I looked up. It was him. No coat, just his shirt sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He leaned against the doorframe of my cubicle, arms crossed. I shouldn't be here, he said softly. My chest tightened. But you are. He nodded. Can I sit? I gestured to the spare chair. Always. He sat, ran a hand through his hair. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked tired. Not just physically, emotionally. You ever wonder, he said slowly, if everything you build is standing on the wrong foundation? I tilted my head. Every day. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I think I've been lying to myself for years. I swallowed. About what? He looked at me, long quiet, then said it. Myself. I didn't move, didn't speak. Let him say it how he needed to. I spent so long playing a part, he said. Straight, in control, untouchable, because the alternative meant risking everything I'd worked for. I nodded slowly. But lately, he continued, it's hard to pretend. And every time I see you, hear you, I wonder how you do it. My throat closed. I'm not brave, I said. He shook his head. You're honest. That's braver. Silence. Then, I see you, he said. More than you know. My heart was pounding. What do you see? He leaned in. The real you. His voice dropped to a whisper. And I wish I'd met you 10 years ago. I didn't know what to do. Every instinct screamed. Say something. Touch him. Step forward. But I didn't. I stayed still. Because the weight of the moment was too delicate. Too raw. And then, just as suddenly, he stood. I shouldn't have said that, he whispered. I opened my mouth, but he shook his head. This changes nothing. Not here. Not yet. He walked out before I could stop him. That night, I didn't sleep. His words ran through me like a current I couldn't shut off. I wish I'd met you 10 years ago. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe he never would be. But something had cracked open. And once you see someone fully, once they show you the part they hide from everyone else, there's no going back. Not to how things were. Not to pretending. After Ethan walked out that night, the silence he left behind felt louder than any argument. I didn't leave the office right away. I just sat there, staring at my screen, his chair still angled toward me like it had something left to say. My fingers hovered over my keyboard, pretending to finish the pitch deck, but my mind was nowhere near work. He said, I see you. He said, I wish I'd met you 10 years ago. And then he left. He didn't ask for anything, didn't try to push the boundary too far. And that somehow made it even harder, because what he did ask for, without saying the words, was time, and maybe permission to want more. I went home late, made tea, didn't drink it. I kept checking my phone, half hoping he'd message something, anything, to tell me it wasn't a mistake. But he didn't. Not that night. Not the next morning either. Saturday passed like fog. I wandered around my apartment like a guest. Every time my phone buzzed, I checked it with too much hope, but it was just spam, group texts, or calendar alerts. Sunday came. Still nothing. By Sunday night, I'd almost convinced myself I imagined all, that it was just a moment, a lapse in judgment he would forget by Monday morning. Then, at 1:12 a.m., my phone lit up. Ethan Harper. I shouldn't have said what I said, but I don't regret it. I'm just afraid of what it could mean. For you, for me, for everything. I read it 3 times. Then once more. He didn't ask a question. Didn't apologize. He just admitted fear. And somehow, that was more vulnerable than any confession. I stared at my phone for 10 full minutes before responding. Me, I haven't stopped thinking about it either. But I'm not afraid. Not of what I feel. Only of pretending it never happened. He didn't reply. Not that night. Monday morning, the office felt colder. He wasn't in yet. I tried to focus. Emails. Reports. Matthew's campaign revisions. But every time I heard footsteps near my desk, my body tensed. Finally, around 9:20, I heard the familiar click of his shoes against the polished tile. He passed my cubicle without stopping. No nod. No glance. Just kept walking, jacket still on, jaw tight. It felt like a warning. Not here. Not now. Around noon, I got the message. A calendar invite. Lunch, private review, conference room 4B. From Ethan Harper. Time, 12:30 p.m. to 1:15 p.m. No one else invited. I accepted without hesitation. When I walked into conference room 4B, he was already there. No laptop, no papers. Just him. He didn't say anything at first. He shut the door gently, turned, and sighed. I've been doing this long enough to know where this goes, he said. I waited, and I've been closeted long enough to know the damage it does. My heart was thudding. He walked over to the window, looked out, then back at me. I told myself I was fine keeping my world small. That success was enough. That control was safer than honesty. He paused. But then you showed up. I swallowed. And now what? I asked. He looked at me, not like a boss, not even like a friend, but like someone trying to unlearn years of silence. I don't know, he said honestly. I just know I can't unknow how it feels to be near you. We sat down at the table, opposite each other. He kept his eyes on his hands. I'm not trying to take advantage of you, he said. I know how this looks. Power imbalance. HR violations. Hell, I've lectured interns about this kind of thing. I'm not an intern, I said softly. He met my gaze. No, you're not. I know what I'm feeling, I continued, and I'm not confused. He studied me. Neither am I. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he asked the one question I wasn't ready for. Would you ever walk away from the job? The breath caught in my throat. What? I mean it, he said. If this became something real, I can't ask you to stay and pretend. And I can't keep playing both sides of the line. The weight of it hit me all at once. He wasn't talking about now. He was talking about after. After we knew for sure. After we stopped running. I don't know. I admitted. He nodded. Fair. The meeting ended with no decisions. No plans. But something had shifted. A door had opened. Quietly. Carefully. And neither of us was ready to shut it. That evening, I found another message. Ethan Harper, don't respond. Just read. I dreamt last night that you were sitting across from me at the Habersham launch party. You were wearing a navy suit. You looked proud, and I couldn't stop smiling. I woke up terrified I'd never get to see that for real. I stared at it in bed, alone in my room, and I realized something. This wasn't just a story about a boss and an employee. It was a story about two people. One learning how to speak the truth for the first time, and the other brave enough to listen. By Thursday, the tension at the office had returned, but not in a bad way, more like something coiled under the surface. Eyes meeting too long, hands brushing near the copier, words left half-finished before someone else walked in. Late that night, I stayed behind again. As I packed up, I heard someone clear their throat behind me. Ethan, in his coat, his hair slightly out of place. He held a paper bag. Dinner, he said. Didn't think you'd eaten. I blinked. You brought me food? He shrugged. Figured it was my turn. We sat at the break room table. Plastic forks. Thai noodles. Dim overhead light. He didn't talk about work. He asked me what I listened to on the subway. What my childhood dog's name was. What I was most afraid of, not just in life, but in love. And I answered. All of it, honestly. As we finished, he leaned back, watching me. You're dangerous, he said softly. I smirked. Why is that? Because you make it feel easy. Being real. Then he leaned forward. No kiss. No dramatic confession. Just rested his forehead against mine, like he was trying to memorize a feeling, and whispered, I want more time with you. Somewhere we don't have to lie. When Ethan suggested getting out of the city, he said it like a man offering a smoke in secret, half daring, half nervous. We were standing by the windows in his office after hours. Outside, Manhattan glittered in its usual noise and chaos. Inside, it was just us and the quiet hum of tension that had been building between us for weeks. There's a cabin upstate, he said, not quite looking at me. Belongs to a friend. He's out of the country for a few months. It's private, quiet, no signals to cross. I raised an eyebrow. You mean no phone signal? I mean no job titles. No expectations. Just time. Just us. It was the first time he'd said us in a sentence that didn't end in a half apology. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to say yes, but because part of me knew whatever happened at that cabin, it would change everything. And I wasn't sure we could unchange it after. We left Friday evening. He picked me up in his car, a sleek charcoal SUV that still smelled like dealership leather. He didn't dress like my boss. No blazer. No pressed shirt. Just a dark sweatshirt, jeans, and a quiet tension in his jaw. The drive was long, 3 hours of winding roads and shared silences, the kind that said more than words. Sometimes he'd look over at me like he was about to speak. Then he wouldn't. Just turned up the music. Soft piano over synth, the kind you play when you're too scared to be alone with your thoughts. I let him have the silence. Not because I didn't want to talk, but because I sensed he needed to arrive there first, on his own terms. The cabin was tucked deep into the woods, a simple structure with big windows and even bigger fireplace. No neighbors in sight, no reception, just trees, wind, and whatever this thing between us had become. We unloaded groceries, lit the fire, sat across from each other with mugs of tea that neither of us drank. Finally he spoke. "I've never done this before," he said, staring into the flames. I didn't ask what this meant. I knew. Been alone with someone? I offered. Been honest with someone? He corrected. His voice was soft. Careful. And I don't mean telling the truth on a form or a file or a meeting. I mean actually letting someone see me, all of me, without rehearsing first. He looked up at me. "And I'm scared." I nodded. "Me too." He smiled faintly. "Good. At least we're equally unqualified." That night we didn't touch, didn't kiss, didn't try to turn the moment into something bigger than it was. Instead, we laid on opposite sides of the couch, listening to the fire crackle, trading truths like cards on a table. He told me his real middle name, Lewis. I told him I hated my handwriting, but kept writing in journals anyway. He told me his first real crush was his high school English teacher, a man named Carter who made Hemingway sound like poetry. I told him mine was my lifeguard at age 13. I drowned in my own nerves before ever speaking to him. He laughed, really laughed, and something broke open between us. Not passion, not lust, but recognition. He wasn't just a boss, and I wasn't just an employee. We were men who'd spent too many years folding ourselves into the versions the world told us were acceptable. But here, in this cabin, in the cold, under the whisper of pines, there was no one performed for. Just him, just me, and finally, just truth. The second day was warmer, even if the air wasn't. We cooked breakfast together, or tried to. He burned the eggs. I undercooked the pancakes. We laughed. We cursed. He poked my ribs when I dropped a spatula and said I had the clumsiest grace he'd ever seen. At one point, I leaned over to reach for cinnamon and felt his breath on my neck. Neither of us moved. Time paused. Then he whispered, "I want to kiss you, but I'm terrified I'll mess this up." I turned, slowly. "You won't," I said. And for the first time since we met, Ethan kissed me. No calculation, no restraint, no power games. Just warmth and want, and the feeling of two people finally doing what their bodies had been begging for long before their minds caught up. We spent that night together. Not rushed, not reckless, just real. We didn't talk about the office, or Habersham, or what Monday would mean. We just laid there, tangled in each other, his fingers tracing the lines of my arm like they were secrets he'd always wanted to learn. At one point, he said, "I didn't think I was allowed to feel this way." I replied, "You always were." Then he whispered, "I just never had someone to show me how." The next morning, I woke up to sunlight pouring through the window, and Ethan quietly watching me. He looked peaceful in a way I'd never seen. No guarded expressions, no tension behind his eyes. "Hi," I said, voice raspy. "Hi," he replied. Then, "I don't want to go back." Neither do I. But we knew we had to, Because life doesn't pause for clarity. And honesty, no matter how freeing, doesn't erase responsibility. On the drive back, the air was quieter. Not heavy, just full. Like something sacred had been said between us. And now we had to carry it back into a world where people might not understand. As we crossed back into the city, the buildings felt sharper, louder, more judgmental. Ethan pulled over 2 blocks before the office. "I think we should walk in separately," he said without turning to me. "I figured," I said, "but I want you to know," he added, finally facing me, "that weekend was the most honest I've been in years." I nodded. "Me too." He reached across the console, took my hand, squeezed it once, then let go. And just like that, we were back. Not as boss and employee, not yet as something public, but as 2 people who now had a secret the world wasn't ready for. And maybe a love story neither of us had expected. When Ethan suggested getting out of the city, he said it like a man offering a smoke in secret, half daring, half nervous. We were standing by the windows in his office after hours. Outside, Manhattan glittered in its usual noise and chaos. Inside, it was just us and the quiet hum of tension that had been building between us for weeks. "There's a cabin upstate," he said, not quite looking at me. "Belongs to a friend. He's out of the country for a few months. It's private, quiet, no signals to cross." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean no phone signal?" "I mean no job titles. No expectations. Just time. Just us." It was the first time he'd said us in a sentence that didn't end in a half apology. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to say yes, but because part of me knew whatever happened at that cabin, it would change everything. And I wasn't sure we could unchange it after. We left Friday evening. He picked me up in his car, a sleek charcoal SUV that still smelled like dealership leather. He didn't dress like my boss. No blazer, no pressed shirt, just a dark sweatshirt, jeans, and a quiet tension in his jaw. The drive was long, 3 hours of winding roads and shared silences, the kind that said more than words. Sometimes he'd look over at me like he was about to speak. Then he wouldn't. Just turned up the music. Soft piano over synth, the kind you play when you're too scared to be alone with your thoughts. I let him have the silence. Not because I didn't want to talk, but because I sensed he needed to arrive there first, on his own terms. The cabin was tucked deep into the woods, a simple structure with big windows and an even bigger fireplace. No neighbors in sight, no reception, just trees, wind, and whatever this thing between us had become. We unloaded groceries, lit the fire, sat across from each other with mugs of tea that neither of us drank. Finally, he spoke. "I've never done this before," he said, staring into the flames. I didn't ask what this meant. I knew. Been alone with someone? I offered. Been honest with someone, he corrected. His voice was soft, careful. And I don't mean telling the truth on a form or a file or a meeting. I mean actually letting someone see me, all of me, without rehearsing first. He looked up at me, and I'm scared. I nodded. "Me too." He smiled, faintly. "Good. At least we're equally unqualified." That night, we didn't touch, didn't kiss, didn't try to turn the moment into something bigger than it was. Instead, we laid on opposite sides of the couch, listening to the fire crackle, trading truths like cards on a table. He told me his real middle name, Lewis. I told him I hated my handwriting, but kept writing in journals anyway. He told me his first real crush was his high school English teacher, a man named Carter who made Hemingway sound like poetry. I told him mine was my lifeguard at age 13. I drowned in my own nerves before ever speaking to him. He laughed, really laughed, and something broke open between us. Not passion, not lust, but recognition. He wasn't just a boss, and I wasn't just an employee. We were men who'd spent too many years folding ourselves into the versions the world told us were acceptable. But here, in this cabin, in the cold, under the whisper of pines, there was no one performed for. Just him, just me, and finally, just truth. The second day was warmer, even if the air wasn't. We cooked breakfast together, or tried to. He burned the eggs. I undercooked the pancakes. We laughed. We cursed. He poked my ribs when I dropped the spatula and said I had the clumsiest grace he'd ever seen. At one point, I leaned over to reach for the cinnamon and felt his breath on my neck. Neither of us moved. Time paused. Then he whispered, "I want to kiss you, but I'm terrified I'll mess this up." I turned, slowly. "You won't," I said. And for the first time since we met, Ethan kissed me. No calculation. No restraint. No power games. Just warmth and want, and the feeling of two people finally doing what their bodies have been begging for long before their minds caught up. We spent that night together. Not rushed. Not reckless. Just real. We didn't talk about the office. Or Habersham. Or what Monday would mean. We just laid there, tangled in each other, his fingers tracing the lines of my arm like they were secrets he'd always wanted to learn. At one point, he said, "I didn't think I was allowed to feel this way." I replied, "You always were." Then he whispered, "I just never had someone to show me how." The next morning, I woke up to sunlight pouring through the window and Ethan quietly watching me. He looked peaceful in a way I'd never seen. No guarded expressions, no tension behind his eyes. "Hi," I said, voice raspy. "Hi," he replied. Then, "I don't want to go back." Neither do I. But we knew we had to, because life doesn't pause for clarity. And honesty, no matter how freeing, doesn't erase responsibility. On the drive back, the air was quieter. Not heavy, just full, like something sacred had been said between us. And now we had to carry it back into a world where people might not understand. As we crossed back into the city, the buildings felt sharper, louder, more judgmental. Ethan pulled over 2 blocks before the office. "I think we should walk in separately," he said without turning to me. "I figured," I said. "But I want you to know," he added, finally facing me, "that weekend was the most honest I've been in years." I nodded. "Me too." He reached across the console, took my hand, squeezed it once, then let go. And just like that, we were back. Not as boss and employee. Not yet as something public, but as 2 people who now had a secret the world wasn't ready for. And maybe a love story neither of us had expected. For 48 hours after we got back in the cabin, everything at the office was normal, at least on the surface. Ethan and I spoke the same way we always had. Firm tones, focus on deliverables and campaign deadlines. He addressed me as Morgan, in meetings like usual. I didn't linger by his door or look at him too long in the hallways. To anyone else, we were just 2 professionals doing our jobs. But beneath it all, something had shifted. Something thick and electric, like heat from a low-burning fire. When we passed each other, our eyes always met for a second too long. When he sent me Slack messages, I could hear the pauses behind the punctuation. Everything was the same, but everything was different. And that difference, I would soon realize, was easier to feel than it was to hide. It happened on a Wednesday. I was in the break room, pouring coffee, when Clara from accounting walked in. She was sharp, always watching, always dressed like she was ready to walk into a Vogue editorial. We weren't close, but we got along. Small talk, occasional office banter. Nothing deep. She smiled as she passed me, opened the fridge, pulled out her yogurt, and leaned on the counter beside me. "So," she said, drawing the word out, "you and Harper getting pretty cozy these days, huh?" My hand paused mid-pour. "Excuse me," I said, careful not to sound anything but confused. She raised a brow. "Oh, come on. The early meetings? The after-hours brainstorms? I passed by conference room 4B last week and saw the 2 of you sitting pretty close. Lights off, by the way." My stomach dropped. I forced a casual shrug. "We're working on a project." "Sure," she said, popping the lid on her yogurt. "Just be careful. People talk." I looked at her fully then. She wasn't being mean, just opportunistic, like she smelled smoke and wanted to see if there was fire. "Appreciate the concern," I said with a tight smile, and walked out before I said something I'd regret. But inside I was panicking. That night, I waited until the office emptied out. Then I knocked on Ethan's door. He looked up, surprised. "Hey." Clara saw us, I said without preamble. She said something today. Joking, but not really. His jaw clenched. He stood and walked to the window, rubbing the back of his neck. What exactly did she see? He asked. Us in 4B, sitting close. Lights dim. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, this was always a risk. I nodded. So what do we do? He turned to me. His voice was low, serious. We stay professional. We do our jobs. No text during work hours. No private meetings. No lingering glances. And the other stuff? I asked, meaning. Us. He looked down. That has to wait. Something sharp twisted in my chest. I didn't sign up to be a secret forever, Ethan. He looked at me then, eyes filled with something I didn't expect. Sadness. I know, he said, but I'm not ready to lose everything I built over a rumor. I swallowed. Neither am I. But this thing between us isn't just a rumor. He sighed. I know. I walked out without saying more. Because if I stayed, I might say too much. Or worse. Let him see how much it hurt. The next few days were torture. We kept our distance. No messages. No conversations unless necessary. And every time I saw him walk past my desk, without even glancing at me, I felt like I was being erased. But the worst came Friday morning. An email popped up from HR. Subject: Scheduled check-in Alex Morgan. Time: Monday, 10 a.m. Room: HR Conference 1A. No explanation. No context. Just that. My hands went cold. I looked around the office. Nothing seemed off. People were working like usual. But I felt like someone had just pulled the floor out from under me. I forwarded the email to Ethan with a simple message. Me: do you know about this? 10 minutes later, a reply. Ethan: no, I'll find out. But he didn't come to my desk. He didn't call me in. He didn't offer any reassurance. And that silence was louder than anything he could have said. That weekend was worse than any before. I didn't hear from him. I didn't reach out. We were both pretending to be safe, to be careful. But in that space between us, fear had taken root, and Monday came too fast. I sat in the HR room at 9:58 a.m., fingers locked in my lap, heart pounding like a war drum. The door opened. Amanda, the HR manager, walked in. She smiled too politely. Alex, she said, sitting across from me. Thanks for coming. What's this about? I asked, voice steady. She opened a file. Nothing disciplinary, just a wellness check-in. We've had a few anonymous concerns raised about after-hours activity and boundaries between leadership and team members. I froze, and she continued, while no one's accused anyone of anything improper, we are obligated to assess whether any perceived imbalance or inappropriate mentorship exists. I swallowed hard. Has someone said something specific? Amanda shook her head. We don't name sources. But the nature of the concern mentions several late meetings, shifts in behavior, and, quote, unusual access to executive-level decisions. I stared at her. So I'm being investigated for being good at my job? She raised her hands. No one's accusing you, Alex. We're simply gathering information. She slid a page across the table. A form. Standard procedure. Review. Sign. It felt like betrayal printed in ink. I signed, stood, and walked out without a word. Back at my desk, I opened my inbox. A message from Ethan. Ethan, I'm sorry. I tried to stop it. They overrode me. I stared at the screen, fingers trembling, then typed back. So you're just going to let them treat me like a liability? No reply. He didn't speak to me all day, not even after everyone had left. So I packed my bag, walked out of the building, and stood at the corner, unsure if I was angrier at him or myself. And that's when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned. Ethan. His expression was unlike anything I'd seen on him before. Raw. Apologetic. Wrecked. I didn't know how to protect you, he said. You were supposed to protect us. I snapped. But you chose the company. He looked down. I chose fear, he admitted. Because that's what I know best. I shook my head. I can't be the only brave one, Ethan. Not anymore. Then I walked away. And this time, I looked back. The week after I walked away from Ethan, outside the building was the longest of my life. I showed up at the office every day, sat at my desk, did my job, but I didn't smile. I didn't linger. I didn't look at his door. And he didn't come to mine. We were strangers again. Worse than strangers. Witnesses to something we now had to pretend never happened. And the silence between us had started to rot. HR didn't contact me again. No follow-up. No warning. Just a shadow that hung behind everything I did, every hallway I walked, every meeting I spoke in. It was clear someone was watching. Clara stopped making casual comments. She watched me, though her glances weren't subtle. Neither were the murmurs that followed whenever Ethan and I happened to be in the same room. We weren't caught, but we weren't invisible anymore either. And still, Ethan said nothing. No late-night messages. No calendar invites. No cabin. No warmth. I didn't expect a grand gesture, but part of me kept hoping he'd do something. Anything. To show me we hadn't imagined it. That what we shared wasn't just a pause in his loneliness. But nothing came until Thursday. That morning, an all-staff email went out. Subject, Executive Town Hall, required attendance. Time, 4 p.m. Location, main auditorium. People groaned about it all day. Another status dump, they said. More fluff from the top. I didn't pay it much attention either. Until 3:59, when we all shuffled in and Ethan was already on stage. No slides. No assistants. No microphone fidgeting. Just him, standing there in a black sweater and slacks, hands folded, looking less like a CEO and more like a man about to tell a secret. I sat in the fourth row, close enough to see the tension in his jaw, the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He waited for the room to settle. Then quietly he said, "I have something personal to share today. It isn't a memo. It isn't a restructure. It's a confession." The room fell still. People glanced at each other. Ethan looked out over the sea of his employees, the company he built, the image he curated, the role he played for years. And then he said, "For most of my career, I've kept my personal life buried under professionalism. I believe that was how you earned respect, how you kept your power. You showed up, performed well, and stayed quiet about anything that might make you different." He paused. I told myself it was safer that way. That vulnerability was weakness. That honesty would cost me everything. A few chairs creaked. But recently, he continued, someone showed me what courage actually looks like, not in boardrooms, not in numbers, but in truth. Quiet, steady, terrifying truth. I froze. My lungs locked. He was doing it. Ethan took a breath, then said, "I'm gay. And I've spent years hiding that part of myself because I thought I had to choose between being respected and being real." Gasps, whispers, and then silence again. He didn't falter. But that lie has become heavier than the truth. And I can't build a company that claims to value authenticity while I keep living in fear of my own. His eyes scanned the crowd. I'm not sharing this to shock anyone. I'm sharing it because I believe in leading honestly. And because someone I admire deeply, reminded me that honesty isn't weakness. It's leadership. His voice didn't crack, but mine did. Inside. After the meeting, people clapped, some hesitantly, some in real solidarity. But it wasn't a standing ovation. It was quieter than that, like people were trying to process what they just witnessed. I slipped out before the end, walked straight to the elevator, hands shaking, stomach in knots. I didn't want to be seen, didn't want people guessing, but I didn't make it far. The elevator dinged, and Ethan was standing inside it, alone. He held the door, said nothing. I stepped in. We rode down in silence, just the two of us. When the doors opened in the lobby, he said, "Come with me. We can go far, just around the corner, to a quiet coffee shop neither of us ever used." He ordered 2 drinks without asking, brought them to the table, sat across from me, then finally said, "I know I should have said something to you first, before the announcement." I didn't answer. I was scared, he admitted. of losing the company, of people thinking it was unprofessional, of dragging you into something you didn't ask for. But you did, I said. You dragged me into everything, then left me in it alone. He nodded. I know. There was no defense in his voice, just truth. I thought if I came out publicly, I could protect you, he said. That if people saw me take the hit first, they'd stop whispering about you. I shook my head. You should have let me decide that. I know. Silence. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table. I've been a coward, Alex, not because I stayed quiet, but because I expected you to carry the weight I wasn't willing to. I looked at him, hard, and for the first time, I didn't see my boss. I saw a man trying to unlearn shame in real time. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I'm asking you to believe that I'm ready to stop hiding. My throat tightened. He took a sip of his coffee, then looked me in the eyes. I want to start over, he said. Not as your supervisor, not as someone above you, but as a man who sees you clearly and wants to earn a place in your life honestly. I blinked. That's not how it works, Ethan. I whispered. You don't get to flip a switch and suddenly become the version of yourself I needed months ago. He swallowed. I know, he said, but maybe I can be the version you need now. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of his words settle. Because something in me, something I hadn't dared to admit, wanted to say yes, but not out of nostalgia, not because of who he'd been, but because of who he might become if he kept choosing truth over fear. So I said, one condition. He nodded. Anything. We do this slowly, I said. Publicly, privately, whatever, but with no more shadows. No more mixed signals. You either show up or you don't. He reached across the table, took my hand, held it. I'll show up, he said. This time I believed him. The Monday after Ethan came out publicly, the office felt like it had been rearranged overnight. Not physically. The furniture was all where it belonged. But something else had shifted. The energy, the looks, the unspoken rules. People walked past his office slower. Meetings started a little more awkwardly. Small talk felt heavier, too polite, too curated. And every time someone spoke to me, I could feel the weight behind their words. The curiosity, the assumptions. I wasn't just Alex Morgan anymore. I was Alex Morgan, the one the boss came out for. Some were kind, overly so, like Julia from PR, who stopped by my desk with a latte and a too-wide smile. Hey, just want to say that was so brave of him. And, you too, for being so composed through everything. I blinked. Thanks, I guess. She leaned in. So are you two like together? I raised an eyebrow. Are you always this subtle? She laughed awkwardly and walked off, muttering something about just being supportive. Others weren't subtle or kind. A few team leads suddenly stopped looping me into higher-level meetings. My Slack went quieter. Projects I'd been managing got reassigned to streamline things. And then there were the whispers. He was promoted pretty fast. I heard they were out of town together last weekend. No way HR didn't know. They're probably just covering it up now. I wasn't paranoid. I was being watched. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because, for the first time in my life, being seen had consequences. Ethan called me into his office that Friday. I hadn't been in there since the day we left for the cabin. The door closed behind me with a heavy click. He looked tired. I'm sorry, he said, before I even sat down. For what now? I asked, try and keep the edge out of my voice. For not anticipating this, he said. I thought coming out would fix things, clarify them, make space for us. I sat down across from him. It didn't. It made us targets. He nodded. I know. He reached across the desk, instinctively, but stopped short. We can't keep pretending the rest of the office is okay with this. I said, even the ones who smile to our faces, they're still watching, still waiting for one of us to mess up. I hate that, he whispered. So do I replied. But it's real. That weekend we met for dinner, not in secret, not far from the city. A quiet Italian place in Soho, dimly lit, soft music, no familiar faces. We sat in a booth in the back. For a while, we didn't talk about the office. We talked about books, music, the way I always skip the last 2 pages of a novel because I don't want it to end. The way he keeps his Spotify playlist private because he's terrified someone will find out how much Taylor Swift he actually listens to. We laughed. He reached for my hand across the table, and I let him take it. But eventually, the conversation returned. Because it had to. Because if we didn't name what was happening, it would swallow us. He cleared his throat. They're treating you differently. They're treating us differently. I corrected. He nodded. Some clients have been careful, too. One asked for a different account rep. Another canceled a meeting. My chest tightened. Because of me? Because of the idea of us. We were quiet for a moment. Then I asked the question I've been dreading. Do you regret telling them? He looked up quickly. No. God, no. Not for a second. But... He hesitated. But I'm scared of what it'll cost us long term, he said. I'm scared I handed people a weapon they didn't deserve to have. And now they're using it, I said quietly. He nodded. We sat in that silence, in the glow of candlelight, in the tension between love and strategy. And then he said something I wasn't expecting. I've been thinking of stepping down. I blinked. From the company? He nodded. From the top role, at least. Let someone else be the figurehead. I'd stay on as consultant, investor. But maybe it's time to stop leading the way I have been. Why? I asked, stunned. Because I don't want to be a symbol, Alex, he said. I want to live. With you. Out loud. And if this company makes that impossible, then maybe it's not worth clinging to. My breath caught. You'd give up everything? He shook his head. I'd finally start choosing something that's mine. We didn't make any decisions that night, but something settled between us. A shared understanding. That love, real love, asked for hard choices, and we were reaching the point where those choices couldn't be postponed anymore. Monday came fast, and with it, a surprising shift. At the weekly morning huddle, Ethan walked in early, calm, steady, confident in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. He started with the usual updates. Campaign wins, financial projections. Then he paused. I want to address something head-on, he said. People looked up from their notebooks. He continued. Some of you may have questions about recent rumors, changes, or decisions being made around the firm. You may also have opinions. That's fine. That's your right. He paced slowly, hands clasped. But let me be clear. Who I am and who I choose to love does not affect my leadership. It does not affect my standards. And it sure as hell does not affect how this business will be run moving forward. Silence. My personal life isn't a scandal. It's not gossip. And if that's something you struggle with, I suggest you take a hard look at what makes you uncomfortable, because it won't be me. I stared at him, proud, stunned, moved. And to my team, he added, eyes briefly flicking to me, especially those who've carried extra weight on my behalf, you have my full respect and my gratitude. The meeting ended without applause, but as people filed out, they were quiet, thoughtful. A few even nodded at me. Not fake, not forced, just a little more human. Later that afternoon, Clara passed me in the hallway. She didn't stop, but she said softly as she passed, respect. One word, but it was enough. That night, Ethan and I didn't talk strategy. We didn't plan a press release. We didn't draft exit plans or weigh options. We just sat on his couch, wine in hand, music low, legs brushing. And for the first time in weeks, I felt light, unhidden, chosen. When Ethan said he was thinking of stepping down, I didn't fully believe he'd do it. Not because I thought he was lying, but because I couldn't imagine him without the company. This place wasn't just something he built. It was him. Every policy, every corner office, every intern with dreams too big and sleep too little. They were all pieces of his legacy. So when he called me into his office on a rainy Tuesday and said, "It's done," I froze. What do you mean, done? I asked. I spoke to the board this morning. he said. I'm stepping down as CEO by the end of the quarter. I stood there like my shoes had been bolted to the floor. You really did it? He nodded, quiet. I meant what I said. I want to live honestly. And I can't do that if I'm stuck pretending I'm only allowed to have ambition, not love. I sat down slowly. So what happens next? He looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't look like a boss. He looked like a man without armor. That's what scares me, he said. I don't know. Over the next few days, the news trickled out across the company. There was no dramatic press release, just an internal memo. Ethan Harper will transition into a strategic advisor role effective next quarter. Leadership will be assumed by COO Vanessa Clark. Reactions were mixed. Some people whispered that he was being pushed out. Others said he'd probably start a new firm. One guy in legal joked that Ethan had probably found God or something. No one really understood what was happening, except me, and maybe that's why it felt heavier than I expected, because even though Ethan didn't say it out loud, I knew the truth. He'd stepped down for me. At first, I felt flattered, seen, important, but then the guilt started to creep in. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd wonder, did I ruin the thing he loved most? What if he wakes up one day and resents me for this? What if I'm not enough outside of the secrecy and tension? One night, we sat on his balcony, watching the lights of the city blink like tired stars. He poured us whiskey. Neither of us touched it. I keep thinking. I said finally, what if this was a mistake? He didn't look at me, just listened. You've worked your whole life for that position, I continued, and now it's gone. For what? A maybe? A risk? A guy who still isn't sure where he fits in your world. His jaw tensed. That's not fair, he said. Don't make this about guilt. I'm not trying to, I replied, but I can't ignore that I feel like I took something from you. He turned to me sharply. Didn't take anything, he said. I gave it up, willingly, because I didn't want my life to only be about control, because I finally wanted something real. I didn't respond, because part of me still didn't believe it. Not really. Vanessa Clark, the new CO in waiting, called me into her office that Friday. I expected it to be about transition protocols, account handovers, the usual shuffle. But the moment I sat down, I realized it wasn't business at all. I want to be clear about something, she said, folding her hands. I'm not Ethan. I nodded. I didn't think you were. She tilted her head. There's been talk. What kind of talk? She raised an eyebrow. Come on, Alex. You know exactly what kind. Half this building thinks you're the reason he's leaving. The other half thinks you'll be gone next. I swallowed. I haven't broken any rules, I said. You haven't, she agreed. But optics matter. And right now, the company's reputation is shaky. I kept my gaze steady. So, what are you saying? I'm saying, she replied, be careful, because people will blame you whether it's fair or not. She didn't say I was being pushed out. She didn't have to. That weekend, I met up with my best friend, Liam, for brunch, someone far removed from the corporate world. He listened as I explained everything, the company politics, the whispers, the wait. When I finished, he stirred his coffee and said, You're scared he gave up too much for you, right? I nodded. And now you feel like you have to match that sacrifice? Yes. He set his mug down. Let me ask you something, he said. If you and Ethan broke up tomorrow, would you feel relieved? The question hit me like a punch. No, I said immediately. Would you regret being with him? No. Then what are you actually afraid of? I stared at him. He leaned in. You're afraid that something this good is going to fall apart the second you believe in it. I didn't speak, because he was right. Back at Ethan's apartment that night, I found him on the floor of his living room, sorting through old files, boxes, notebooks, handwritten plans from when the company was just a dream. He held up a photo, a much younger version of him standing in front of a dingy office with the original logo taped to the glass. I remember that guy, he said. He thought success would fix everything. I sat down beside him. And did it? He shook his head. Success just gave me more things to lose. He looked at me then. But then I met you. And for the first time, I realized I wanted to risk losing something, because it finally meant something. I touched his hand. "I'm scared, too," I whispered. "Of me?" he asked. "No, of being happy." He exhaled. "We're quite the pair." We didn't figure it all out that night, but we promised each other one thing. No more silence. No more guessing. No more martyrdom disguised as love. If we were going to make this work, it wouldn't be about what we sacrificed. It would be about what we built together, even if it meant starting from scratch. I always thought stepping out of Ethan's shadow would feel like freedom, like sunlight after months in a locked room. But the truth? It felt more like vertigo. Because once the spotlight shifted, once people stopped seeing me as is, I had to ask myself the question I've been avoiding since the beginning. Who am I without him standing behind me? Ethan's transition from CEO to strategic advisor happened quietly. There were no farewell speeches, no emotional boardroom toasts. Just a calendar update, a new email footer, and his name moved down the org chart. He wasn't in every meeting anymore. He didn't sign off on budgets. He didn't call the shots. And for the first time, I did. I was promoted to director of creative strategy 2 weeks after Vanessa stepped in. It was a big deal on paper. A private office, a bigger team, more visibility. People congratulated me with polite smiles. But some of those smiles didn't reach their eyes. One morning, someone had written Harper's Boy on a sticky note and stuck it to my door. I took it down without a word, but it stayed with me, not because it hurt, but because I wasn't sure it was entirely wrong. Ethan didn't come to the office much anymore. He said he wanted to give me space to grow, but it felt more like he was quietly vanishing from the world he once ruled. And when we were home, when it was just the two of us, I could feel him trying to shrink, less eye contact, fewer opinions, and worst of all, silence when I needed his thoughts the most. One night, I was rehearsing a presentation I had to give to a new client. Big brand, high stakes. I was nervous. I asked him, "What do you think of the opener?" He looked up from his glass of wine. "It's fine," he said. "Just fine." He shrugged. "You don't need my input." I closed the laptop slowly. "That's not the point. I want your input." He stood up and walked to the window. "You're the one in charge now, Alex. You don't need me hovering." I stared at him. "This isn't about the job. This is about us." He didn't answer. That night, we didn't sleep in the same bed. I thought things would level out, that the distance was just a phase, a recalibration. But the more I stepped into leadership, the more Ethan pulled away. And somewhere between my rise and his retreat, something broke. It came to a head at the firm's quarterly showcase, the one where we present the next season's campaigns to both clients and internal execs. It was my show this time. I'd spent weeks preparing. Charts, prototypes, pitches. Ethan said he'd come. To support. Quietly. He sat in the back row near the exit. I saw him when I stepped on stage. But he didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't move. After the presentation, which went better than I'd even rehearsed, I looked for him. Gone. No text. No great job. Nothing. I found him at home, in the kitchen, staring at the same glass of wine he hadn't touched since morning. "You didn't say anything," I said, setting down my bag. "I didn't want to steal your moment." I laughed, bitter. "By saying good job? That's stealing." He turned. "You don't get it." "Then help me get it, Ethan. Because all I see is you pushing me away while I'm finally stepping into something I earned." He bristled. "You earned? You think this has nothing to do with me?" Silence. There it was. Raw. Unfiltered. Ugly. "I gave up everything," he said, stepping closer. "And now you get to rise, untouched, untarnished, while I fade into the background. Do you know how that feels?" My voice dropped. "You said you wanted this. You said you were done hiding." "I did," he said, almost shouting now. "But I didn't know it would mean disappearing." I stared at him. "So now you resent me for becoming something you used to be?" He ran a hand through his hair. "No, I resent that I can't be that anymore, and that watching you become it reminds me of everything I lost." His voice cracked. I felt my own chest caving. This wasn't about love. This was about identity, pride, grief, and it was breaking us. We didn't talk for 2 days. We slept in the same apartment, moved in the same spaces, but every word was mechanical. I missed him, but I didn't know how to reach him. Until one night, I came home to find the lights dimmed, candles lit, and Ethan sitting on the floor with a photo album. The one from the early days of his company. The one he used to keep hidden in his closet, like it contained secrets no one deserved to see. He looked up when I entered. I forgot who I was, he said. I walked over slowly, sat beside him. He turned a page. This guy, he said, pointing to a younger version of himself with bright eyes and messy hair, was fearless. He didn't care what anyone thought. He just wanted to create something meaningful. And now, I asked gently, now, he said, I feel like I became the opposite of that. And when I stepped down, I didn't know who to be anymore. So I tried to shrink. I looked at him. You don't have to shrink, Ethan. You just have to evolve. He looked at me. Do you still love me? He asked. Yes, I said without hesitation. But not if it means I have to pretend I'm not proud of myself. He nodded. I'm proud of you too, he whispered. More than you know. And then, after a long, quiet pause, I think it's time I build something new. For me, my heart steadied. What does that look like? He smiled. I don't know yet, but maybe for once, that's the exciting part. The next day, he cleaned out his old home office, started sketching again, actual sketching, like branding ideas and visual storytelling concepts. I saw notebooks piling up. I didn't ask questions, because this time, I wasn't worried he'd vanish. He wasn't stepping away from me. He was stepping towards something else. And for the first time, we weren't walking at different speeds. We were side by side. It was a quiet Saturday morning. Ethan and I had just finished making breakfast. Pancakes, slightly burnt, coffee a little too strong. He was sketching logo ideas at the kitchen counter, and I was reading over a pitch deck on my laptop. It felt peaceful. No office politics. No whispers. Just sunlight and soft jazz playing in the background. And then his phone buzzed. He picked it up casually, glanced at the screen, and froze. What is it? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the screen like it had teeth. Then finally, it's Daniel. I blinked. Daniel who? Daniel Jameson, he said slowly. My old mentor. The guy who gave me my first investor check. We haven't spoken in 6 years. What does he want? Ethan set the phone down like it was poison. He wants to meet. Says he has a proposal. We met Daniel the following afternoon. He suggested a private club in Midtown. The kind with marble staircases, overpriced wine, and waiters who never interrupt unless summoned. Daniel looked exactly like the version of wealth and control you'd expect. White hair, black tailored suit, perfectly polished shoes. He smiled like a shark. When Ethan introduced me as his partner, Daniel gave a nod, not disapproving, but not exactly warm. Then he got to the point. I'm putting together a new firm, he said. Boutique, high-level media meets tech. You'd lead creative innovation. I'd handle capital and operations. Equal partnership. Ethan kept his expression neutral. Why now? Daniel shrugged. You're free now. You have a name, a following. And I don't want to waste another 5 years watching mediocre founders do what we could do better. Then he slid a folder across the table. Inside, contracts, projections, even a list of potential clients already lined up. Think about it, Daniel said. You were born to lead. The whole way home, Ethan was quiet, and I could feel his brain working, flipping through scenarios, running numbers, weighing futures. Later that night, he said, this is the kind of opportunity people don't say no to. I nodded slowly. So are you going to say yes? He looked down at his hands. I don't know. The following week was a blur. Ethan buried himself in the details, reading Daniel's proposal like it was scripture. He took calls behind closed doors, met with lawyers, sketched business models on napkins. He didn't ignore me, but he wasn't with me either. It felt like watching someone fall back into an old habit, and it terrified me, because I'd seen what that version of him looked like The CEO, the perfectionist, the man who buried emotion under ambition. And I didn't want to lose what we had rebuilt. One night, I came home late from a networking event. My tie was loose, my voice hoarse from talking all evening. Ethan was still awake, sitting on the couch, a pen tapping against his knee. He looked up. "You were gone a while." "Yeah," I said, trying to hold my own in a room full of people who still think I slept my way into promotions. He frowned. "Still." I shrugged. Whispers take time to die. He stood, walked to me, placed a hand on my chest. "You don't owe them anything." "Neither do you," I said softly. "So why are you acting like you do?" He pulled back. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, trying to stay calm, "Daniel represents a version of you that you walked away from. And now he's luring you back. Not because it's right, but because he knows you still need to prove something." He clenched his jaw. "Maybe I do." "Ethan, I gave up everything for you, Alex," he snapped. "My title, my legacy. And what did I do with it? Sit home and draw? I need something real." My chest burned. "And what are we, then? A vacation?" He shook his head, looking away. "You know that's not what I meant." "Do I?" I said quietly. "Because it sure as hell feels like you're choosing him over us." We didn't speak the rest of the night. And when I woke up, his side of the bed was cold. That afternoon, I got a message from Vanessa, the new CEO. "Can we meet privately? Something important." I went. She didn't waste time. "I heard about Daniel's proposal to Ethan," she said. "And I also heard he's considering taking it." I nodded cautiously. "That's his decision." "It could impact you," she said bluntly, "if he joins a rival firm, especially one with you connected to it. Even unofficially, people will talk. They already do. This time it won't just be whispers," she said. "It'll be investigations, compliance, reputation damage." I felt the floor beneath me tilt slightly. "Are you saying I should walk away from him?" She hesitated. "I'm saying be aware of the cost." That night, Ethan came home late. I was sitting at the kitchen counter, laptop closed, wine untouched. He dropped his keys and looked at me. "I met with Daniel again today." I didn't speak. "He offered a revised contract," he continued. "More control. No conflict clause. He even agreed to let me bring in my own team. Sounds like everything you ever wanted." I said quietly. He looked at me for a long time, then walked over. I didn't sign. I blinked. "Why not?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folder. Then, without ceremony, tore it in half, page by page, until nothing remained but scraps on the counter. "Because I don't want to build a life on the same terms that once made me feel hollow," he said. "I don't want to go back to being someone who only chases power to avoid feeling small." I swallowed hard. "And us?" I asked. He stepped closer. "You were never the thing I gave everything up for," he said. "You're the reason I finally realized I deserve more than ambition." I exhaled slowly, tears burned behind my eyes. He took my hand, and for the first time since the day he stepped down, I believed him, not just as a partner, but as a man who had finally found a version of himself he didn't want to run from anymore. 6 months later, I stood in a small art gallery in Brooklyn, holding a glass of cheap red wine, watching people gather around a piece on the far wall. It was one of Ethan's, a black and white minimalist poster. No name on it, no branding, just a single sentence in the center. "Build a life you don't have to hide from." People took photos, whispered interpretations, asked the curator if the artist was around. He was across the room, in a simple linen shirt, sleeves rolled, smiling at someone who just asked about his design philosophy. He looked at ease, rooted. Oh, and for the first time in a long time. So, did I? A lot had changed in those 6 months. Ethan turned down Daniel's offer for good. Instead, he launched a small creative collective, part branding studio, part mentorship hub, for young designers and queer creatives trying to find their voice in industries that still didn't know how to hear them. He named it Second Draft, because the first version of your life isn't always the right one, he told me. And that's okay. He kept it quiet. No splashy ads. No boardrooms. But it grew. Word of mouth, talent, truth, and a strange, steady kind of joy. As for me, I stayed at the agency, but I changed the way I worked. I stopped trying to prove I deserved the role. I knew I did. I stopped avoiding hard conversations with leadership. I started setting my own tone. And when Vanessa asked if I wanted to become a VP next year, I told her honestly, I'm not chasing titles anymore. I'm building value. She respected that more than I expected. The whispers, they faded. Some left the company. Some simply got bored. But most realized that Ethan and I weren't a scandal. We were just a story that didn't fit their expectations. A story we were writing for ourselves now. One night, we sat on the balcony of our new place in Williamsburg. Nothing fancy. Just a cozy two-bedroom with creaky floors and mismatched mugs. We shared takeout sushi, our feet tangled beneath the table. Ethan held up a folded piece of paper. I got asked to do a TEDx talk, he said. I raised an eyebrow. About what? He shrugged. Honest leadership. Reinventing success. The usual dramatic buzzwords. I laughed. You're going to do it? I think so, he said, but only if I can talk about us. I paused. Are you sure? He looked at me, and there was no hesitation in his voice. I'm only sure when I talk about us. The talk went viral. Not because it was flashy, but because it was real. He didn't use our names. Didn't call out the company. He simply told a story about a man who built everything, then walked away to find himself. And in doing so, found someone else too. By the end, the room was quiet, and then it exploded with applause. He didn't stay for the networking after. Just slipped out the side door, found me outside. I still get nervous, he admitted. I smiled. That means it matters. Sometimes I still think about the beginning, about the first time he walked past my desk, the late nights, the emails, the elevator silence, the cabin, the fallout, the fear, and how close we came to never becoming this. Not because we weren't right, but because we almost believed we didn't deserve it. We weren't perfect. We fought. We forgot to listen. We made mistakes. But we always came back. Because underneath everything, the career changes, the public scrutiny, the power shifts, there was a quiet truth. We chose each other, not out of desperation, not to escape anything, but because, finally, we could look in the mirror and say, this is who I am, and I'm proud of that. Last weekend, we visited his mother. She hugged him tighter than I'd ever seen. She told him she'd watched his TED Talk 4 times. And when she looked at me, she didn't look like she was still guessing where I stood in his life. She knew. Later, in the car, Ethan took my hand on the center console. I still feel like I'm figuring it all out, he said. I squeezed his fingers. We both are, I said. He smiled. Good, he whispered. Because I'd rather figure out with you than pretend I already have everything. And in that small moment, just headlights and trees and soft music on the stereo, I realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the one we actually wanted to live. Together, unhidden, uncompromised, ours.